Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on learning how to reduce storage TCO by 4 times in under 30 minutes. I am your moderator for the webinar, Adrian Herrera, VP of Marketing. The main presenter is Tony Barbagallo, VP of Product. Tony, say hi to everyone.
Good morning and or afternoon.
Before we begin, I wanted to take care of a little housekeeping. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, go ahead and type them into the dialog window, the questions dialog window to your right or in your control panel. It is a pretty quick webinar. We'll try to answer them throughout the webinar, but if we don't get to them, there will be a Q&A section or session at the end. With that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start doing with a quick overview of Caringo, of the company, and then hand it over to Tony to do a live demo of our most recent product, FileFly. But let's start with a quick overview on Caringo. So we've been in the storage software market for quite some time, since 2005. So we've been focused on storage software and solely on storage software for over a decade now. We are one of the leaders in the space. We have unrivaled integration into some of the most popular ISVs. We are used by some of the largest MSPs out there to provide their cloud storage services. We are used in mission-critical applications for some very large organizations, including the Department of Defense and Department of Justice. And we're used for a wide variety of use cases. Everything from content delivery, so we are the way Ask.com and Match.com host their photos, and we're used for a number of active archive use cases and also big data use cases. We are a recognized leader in the space. As far as the need for object storage or the need for storage software, this should come as no surprise to you. I'm sure you're all experiencing this within your businesses today, but data growth is exploding. It's growing. So 90% of the data in the world has been generated in the last 2 years. And the vast majority of this information is unstructured. Files, photos, videos, that kind of data. Depending on which analysts you want to believe, there's currently, 4 to 8 petabytes in the world, and that's growing to zettabytes, growing to 44 zettabytes by 2020. And that's just massive growth and unfathomable amount of information. And this explosive data growth is really straining traditional storage technologies. They just can't keep pace. So it's not just, first you have the issue of too many files. So in file systems, when you start getting in the billions of files, it's very difficult for file systems to manage that information. And furthermore, it's very difficult for users to keep on getting value from the information. Once you create something, you use it, you really lose track of it, but no one wants to delete anything. And that leads to wasted budget. Data just sits there, files just sit there on your primary storage, even though they're not being used. Limited risk or limited use and unlimited risk are also issues. So files are difficult to search, they're difficult to analyze. This leads to continued risk, whether it's for litigation, you can't find the file you want for litigation purposes, or whether it's just you can't find the file to reuse. There are significant issues in searching files. Protection is also an issue. It's not just about the overall capacity, it's also the drive sizes that are leading to, that are straining RAID. Sorry, I need to cycle this again. So now that we're passing the 4 terabyte drive range, RAID really is just not becoming a practical way to protect your information. This is all leading to tedious management, constant reprovisioning. You're cobbling together technologies to try to protect, to manage, to search and analyze all the data you have on your primary storage. And the last one here is it just limits your scale. So all that complexity, all the mount points you create, all the different technologies you have really limit scale. It's not just about scaling of capacity, it's also about scaling of your management resources. So this is leading to the need for software-defined storage and object storage in particular, because object storage is very good at storing massive amounts of information. And how does object storage do that? The best object storage solutions are the premier ones on the market, scale out on commodity standard hardware, any mix of standard hardware. They provide end-to-end data services. This means that it's not just about storage, it's about enabling access of your content to third-party applications, third-party services, usually through a RESTful interface. Object storage technologies are fault tolerant, so they keep on ticking if something happens. So they usually auto-heal themselves or repair any issues that are encountered. And there are multiple interfaces and hardware deployment options. So the best solutions out there in the market support traditional storage protocols like SMB or CIFS, like NFS, FTP, WebDAV, and they also support some of the latest cloud-based APIs like Amazon S3 API and straight HTTP. And one of the ESG just came out with a really good report, and they polled about 300 organizations of various sizes and asked them if they were considering deploying object storage, and 82% of the respondents said that they have already deployed object storage or they are considering it. 70% say object will eliminate or significantly reduce their NAS footprint in the next 3 years. So if you haven't considered or if you aren't looking at object storage, there's a good chance that your peers within your market, within your industry, already are. And as far as object storage goes, as I said in the beginning, we're one of the market leaders. We are storage for the cloud age. Our main product is Caringo Swarm. And there are two macro functions that Swarm provides. So usually when people talk about object storage, they think about the bottom pink section there, the infrastructure management. From Caringo's perspective, we are a complete software appliance. We boot from bare metal. We give you everything you need in our software. So you're not messing with operating system installations. You're not messing with a metadata database installation and protection. We give you everything you need in one package. You could deploy it very flexibly. You can deploy it as, within your own data center. You can deploy it to provide a service, and you can also deploy it in hybrid configuration. As far as continuous protection goes, we support continuous protection all the way down to the object level. We have some really good white papers, really good webinars on our site if you do want to learn more about continuous protection and erasure coding. And we provide enterprise support. What some object storage solutions don't do that we do is the top half, the data service enablement. So we provide universal access, whether you're dealing with traditional protocols or whether you're dealing with the latest cloud protocols. We support all major protocols. We also support the ability to search and consolidate your files. We have a content portal. It's web-based, but you can also use our very robust APIs to integrate all of these capabilities directly into your applications. And because of the way that we do search, we plug into some of the major and analysis platforms out there like Kibana. So this is just giving you a real high level of the Swarm platform, the object storage platform that we have. For more information, you can go to our site or reach out to us. We just wanted to set the stage for describing FileFly. And one thing we always get, since we have been doing this for quite some time, is the question that how do you easily plug object storage into your existing Filer environment? And to go over that, I will hand it over to Tony.
All right, thanks, Adrian. Wow, and look at that. Hold on one quick second here. There we go. So Adrian sort of set the stage for our new product, FileFly. And basically, FileFly is an application that runs on a Windows file server and essentially transparently moves and migrates files from either Windows file servers or NetApp file servers directly to our Swarm object storage environment that Adrian described. One of the unique capabilities of FileFly is that, and you'll see this when I show it in the demo, is the applications that use the files, if it's users with home directories, it's all transparent to both users and applications. So there's no application changes necessary. Users don't have to alter the way they do their work. And again, the benefit is actually freeing up, as Adrian mentioned, freeing up storage on your primary storage environment, be them Windows file servers or NetApp file servers. In addition, with that space freed, obviously your primary storage backup windows are drastically reduced. One of the other interesting capabilities of FileFly is it can actually act as a global file repository, meaning that FileFly can store data from all of your file servers into a single Swarm cluster, if that's what you desire, thereby giving essentially a consolidated pool of active archive, if you will, storage that can transparently come back to those file servers when accessed. And if you think about the typical cost of commodity hardware combined with Swarm software versus, say, a typical Windows file server or NetApp file server, that's where we've sort of calculated at least a 4x cost reduction versus those typical primary NAS filers. And lastly, Adrian touched on this, but once the data is on Swarm, because of the architecture of our object storage software, that data is continuously protected. It's consolidated from a standpoint of no silos, and also it's searchable, so you can see what data has been placed on the object storage environment, and well as analyzable, if you will, through the metadata. And I'm going to show some of that very shortly. And if we go just one more slide before we go into the demo, the way this is accomplished, I'll show this as well, is through policies. And essentially, you can set a policy on any type of file attribute, be it owner, last time access, size of file, what folders they're in, etc. And those policies can be set. Multiple policies can be set in the same directory structure or across file systems, etc. So the difference between FileFly and if anyone is familiar with sort of traditional file gateways, sort of Samba and Fuse based, those file gateways are essentially having to create a complete map of the file system infrastructure. With FileFly, we've integrated directly to NTFS, so the Windows file system. So that gives performance. There's literally no bottlenecks. If it's an active file, it doesn't even get touched by FileFly. So that performance is basically the same as your native file system performance. What FileFly also does is it attaches some additional metadata to the files as they move into Swarm. So things like owner, the path name, those types of typical information that can help you actually, understand again your file system structure and allows FileFly to bring those files back into the primary storage should they be accessed. So with that, let me go in and just do a quick demo, and that will show it much better than the slides have. So what you're seeing right now, and I'm actually going to play two roles. I'm going to play the role of Tony, the end user with a home directory, and then Tony, the storage administrator, who's going to set up the policies in FileFly. As you can see here, I'm actually on a Windows 2012 server, and you can see here, Tony, the end user, has a home directory called FileFly Demo Share. As we go into it, you see that there's has some archive files, so some tar files, some zip files, etc. I have some database files, and that's important because typically you would not have FileFly transparently archive active transactional database files because they're always getting touched. So again, you can set policies to work around that as well. Some documentation, some image files, etc. So there's a number of files in here. What I want to show you though is let's go into the archives folder, and let's just do a quick look at the properties. So you can see here the size of the folder is a little over 7 gig. The size on the disk is also a little over 7 gig. There has been no migration as yet, and there's nine files in that archives folder. So keep remember that for after we do the migration. So that's kind of setting the stage for the home directory. Now let's take a look at the FileFly administration portal. So now I'll be playing the role of the storage administrator, and the storage administrator will want to set policies and tasks that run on a particular schedule for smartly tiering files off of the primary servers and into Swarm. So the typical hierarchy in FileFly is you have rules. So you create a rule, and then you create policies that act on one or more of the rules, and then tasks which schedule the policies. So simple hierarchical structure. So if we take a look, and I've already set up my server, which is this one here that I just showed you, and the sources and destinations. So again, the home directory in here would be a typical source, and the destination would be the object storage environment that is also running, that's going to be accessed via HTTP. Again, as Adrian mentioned, though, that's all API based, so that's happening behind the scenes. So with that, let me show you a quick rule here. And so one of the rules I want to create, and I have actually already created it just for the sake of time, is I have a rule that matches all zip and tar files. And so you can see here that's the description of it. And so here I've done a file matching pattern of star.zip and star.tgz. As you can see, if I move this over a little bit, you see that there happens to be, and I happen to know that in this home directory, the only place where zip and tgz files are located are in this archives directory. So going back here, you can see I could do other things like size matching when the file was last modified. I could also sort by owner. So basically, attribute state matching, etc. So basically, any file attribute I can create a rule for. So that's my rule, all zip and tgz files. My policy is I would like to smart tier, and you see I have a number of policies here. But in this particular case, I'm going to look at the smart tier all zip and tgz files. So here we go. I have an operation called migrate. I have a number of different operations. I can just gather stats. I can do a remigrate. I can actually scrub the destination, which means if you have files deleted and you are now looking to reclaim space from the object storage environment, you can set a policy to do that as well. You can also do a bulk remigrate. So FileFly actually is a really useful tool if you want to migrate, say, from NetApp to a Windows file or something like that. So here what I've done is I've created this rule and this policy, and it's smart tier all zip and tgz files. So what I've done is I've selected that rule that I just showed, the all zip and tgz files. I have a source. The source is the FileFly demo share. And the destination is, I'm calling it my swarm storage, which is the object storage environment that I've created. And just really quick, we can sort of see it here. This is our configuration tool that shows sort of the cluster that I'm using. But we can you can get that information from our website. So let me go back here. So then so that was the policy, and then finally the task. So there's a number of different tasks. You can see here I've got a task that tiers all files except databases using rules that I've created that eliminate the databases from the policy. So in this particular case, though, there's a task here called schedule, my smart tier of the all zip and TGZ files. I'm choosing a policy that I created, and essentially, as I mentioned, the task is a mechanism to schedule and run policies. So here I've chosen to run this task at 5 after 10 in the evening, every day of every month, and essentially on weekdays. And what I want to do right now is I want to run that right now. So I'm going to run that task right now, and that was fairly quick. So you can see that what I've just done is I've run that migration task, and so the files in that archive directory, because they are all zip and TGZ files, should have been migrated. So you can see here in Windows, they're sort of grayed out right now. And if I go back to the top level and look at properties, now what you can see here is I still have the 7 gig that it shows. So again, from a user workflow standpoint, it's still showing the user that there's 7 gig. This is useful if you have quotas implemented, etc. However, the size on disk now has been reduced to just 16K. So a significant reduction in space and allowing you to reclaim that space. So if I go in here now, you can see everything's grayed out. But what I want to do is I really want to look at one of these zip files. So as an end user now, I'm just going to double click on it so I can see it. And there it is. That is how quickly it just came back from the storage, from the object storage. And there it is. There you can see some of our documentation. If I go back here, you'll see this file now is not grayed out anymore. Hopefully everyone can see that because it has come back. Now, as I had mentioned, this is on a schedule. It runs every evening at 5 after 10, or yes, 5 after 10. So at 5 after 10 this evening, this file is going to get migrated back into storage, which is something that you may want to do. A lot of people create zip files and then they extract the information from the zip file and then they leave the zip file hanging around. Again, more wasted space on the primary file storage. So Adrian had also mentioned that we do have a web-based portal that is a view into our object storage environment. Let me just show that really quickly. So here we can see FileFly data objects. So what I'm showing here is a number of objects, and you can see. Let me try and make this a little bit larger. There we go. What you can see here is that these are the objects that have been moved over into FileFly. So let me just search for those objects that were in that archives directory. So ideally, I should be able to just say that. Looking at the path that had been created, let me refresh and let's see what we get here. So now I've just basically done a search of the object storage environment, and you're going to see here that I have my 9 files that are the zip and tar files from primary file storage. I could actually save this search, and then we call that a collection. So I'm going to say these are the FileFly. Oops. Type much. There we go. Archive. So I can save that. And once that's saved, I will essentially have a collection that will allow me to see just these files again. So that's a very powerful mechanism, essentially the equivalent, if you will, of smart folders. So if I go back up here, you're going to see now I have a new collection called FileFly archive files, and those are those archive files. So it's a fairly powerful mechanism for searching on what you might actually want to view in our object storage environment, and then saving that search. So that is basically the extent of the demo. I don't know if there were, let me check over here, see if there were any questions. I think we're good, Adrian. With that, I will turn it back to you.
All right. So thank you for the demo, Tony. So we're going to open it up now for questions. We'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and type them into the dialog window that you see. I just want to remind you some of the key points that Tony covered. The webinar is titled Save or Learn How to Save 4 times TCO within 30 minutes. But you can actually save a considerable amount more than that. So it isn't just about TCO, but if you're looking just at straight costs, 4 times was the lowest on the scale that we saw through our analysis, and we were basing that on the lowest NetApp cost that we can find. We have our first question. It was, what was the stat about reducing NAS storage again? So there was an ESG report, they polled their audience, and 82% of the respondents have already deployed or are considering deploying, and I believe it was 73% said that this will impact their NAS and SAN environment. And we do have the stats in one of the papers that we have. So if you want to follow up with Tony or I directly, we'll also go ahead and send a link out to the paper to all the viewers, so that's really convenient for you to download. So there's another question, this one's for you, Tony, about pricing. So how do you price FileFly and Swarm? Basically, we have a FileFly bundle price for, I believe, 100 usable terabytes for $34,995, $35,000. And that includes all the software needed, FileFly, Swarm, and Cloud Scaler. And that's so again, it's capacity-based pricing. So are there any files that FileFly doesn't support? Well, FileFly technically supports any files. Any file can be moved into Swarm from primary storage. The reason why I mentioned not moving that database file over is because typically a database file is a large binary file that from a transactional standpoint is probably getting accessed quite often, in which case if it were moved over, certainly be moved over for backup purposes. But if it were moved over, it would typically get migrated back almost immediately because the file needs to be accessed for any transactions to take place. That would be the same way with any type of sort of binary backup file, like for instance Veeam. Veeam stores their Veeam, while they store their backup data in a file and file hierarchy structure, they essentially inspect each and every one of those files when they do an incremental backup, which means each of those files would need to come back over into primary storage. Another question for you, Tony. What storage is used behind the Caringo software? If a company has compliance policies, how are those met in this model? And another question is, how is this priced or licensed? So I think you covered the priced or licensed, but just to repeat the first two again, what storage is used behind the Caringo software? And if a company has compliance policies, how are those met in this model? So in terms of the
storage used behind the Caringo software, and that's really the beauty of Caringo. Any x86 server with any storage capacity is a supported node in the Caringo storage cluster. So you could have older servers with less capacity. You can add them to the cluster. You could have newer servers with very large capacity and add those to the cluster. And essentially, that basically sets up your storage cluster. And if you need more storage, very similar to sort of the Amazon S3 model, when more storage is needed, more nodes are simply added to the Caringo cluster. And that is the real beauty of our scale-out storage model. So the second question was, if the company has compliance policies, how are those met in this model? So first of all, Swarm actually has some unique capabilities around compliance. Swarm actually creates an audit trail. We have worm capability, which is write once, read many, and the audit trail can also be used to. We can also, from a true compliance standpoint, create integrity seals, so every single access is logged, etc. On the Windows side or on the NAS side, we do not disrupt any of the compliance infrastructure that's already in place. So again, that movement between primary storage and Caringo object storage is completely transparent from a workflow standpoint.
And it looks like we're running out of time. The clock is ticking for a minute and 30 seconds. There's another question that says, what hardware is needed to get the infrastructure set up for Caringo? I think you covered the Swarm side, but really quickly in 30 seconds, cover what you need for FileFly from a hardware perspective.
Sure. From a hardware side on FileFly, all FileFly needs at its base level is simply a Windows file server. It can, if your environment is comprised of Windows file servers and those are your primary storage destination, then FileFly can actually run on one of those natively. You don't really even need a separate server for FileFly to run. If you're in a NetApp environment, FileFly integrates with what's called the F policy server in NetApp, but so then FileFly would just run on a Windows server and directly integrate with NetApp.
Yep. So we are running out of time. We scheduled 30 minutes and we have 40 seconds left. We got to all the questions, but if you have additional questions, you see Tony's email address is up there. I'm sure he'll welcome a question from you via email. Tony, I'd like to thank you for your time, and obviously I'd like to thank the viewers for their time. Are there any closing comments you want to say in the last 20 seconds, Tony?
No, thank you everybody for attending. And again, yeah, any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email.
All right, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Bye-bye.